Today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a very, very brief introduction. I'm going to kind of go over, at least to me, what's been really helpful as I think about the objectives of what we do as marketers. Something that we're going to hinge a lot of today's time on is looking at something called the fog behavior model, which informs a lot of how I think about marketing strategy. We're going to look at some ways to apply the fog behavior model to our marketing activities, kind of talk general takeaways, and then we'll have some opportunity for Q&A. As Solomon mentioned, we have people here kind of from organizations across the board. I know many of you are a one-person marketing department. I know many of you are probably a one-person artist, company, organization, and you wear the hats. And so I know that everyone's coming from different budget sizes, some with no budget at all. And so we have a variety of sort of tools at our disposal when we talk about various social media platforms, email, all that good stuff. So that's why today I'm going to take the time to kind of zoom out and focus more on strategy and this mindset that I've found useful as I think about why behind what we do. And every time we send out a piece of marketing, promotion, or generally talk about the work that we want people to come experience with us. So a little bit about me first. I was a theater kid. I came from the world of theater growing up, and then I went to Northwestern University where I studied theater, and I got a minor in sociology as well. Then I ended up grad school at Columbia in New York, where I got an MFA in theater management and producing, which was sort of general arts marketing based, but with a kind of a focus in theater as well. And during my time in New York, I took courses and did some focuses in the areas of press and public relations, budgeting, accounting, and marketing and advertising. In New York, I worked in a variety of capacities, including company management and general management, where one of my duties was to be a primary liaison with various market advertising companies, as well as press and PR firms, as well as producing and marketing. I kind of went from the general management theater track over to marketing, first at New York Theater Workshop, where I was a marketing associate for less than 2 years. Then I came back here to Chicago, was the marketing manager and the director of marketing and communications at Writers Theater. And in 2021, I became the director of marketing and communications at Hubbard Street Dance Chicago, where I am now. Also, if you want to take this time too, and in the chat, you want to drop a little bit about who you are, your name, your pronouns, and what type of artist and organization that you are affiliated with, if any. And then you can get a sense of who else is here with us today, if you so choose. Okay, so why do we have to market? It's not everyone's favorite thing in the world. I love it. I like talking about it. I know many of you would rather spend your time making that you do, but why do we have to do it? So when we kind of zoom out and distill it to its big essentials to me, we want to change people's behavior, right? We want someone to go from not buying a ticket to something to buy a ticket or take some other desired action, like following you on your social media channels, watching your comments. And so the messaging that we want to put out there, we want to make sure it has enough impact that we overcome the inertia that is so easy to ourselves to when we want to just kind of sit on the couch. Nothing. We want to put content out there that makes people excited to get to know you and your work. So I came across this thing called the fog behavior model at this point many years ago, and it really helps when I think about why are we putting content out in the world that gets people to come see us, engage with us. So we're looking at a couple of elements here. Essentially, as it's saying here, it shows that three things must be happening at the same time for behavior change to happen. The user has to have sufficient motivation. The user has to have sufficient ability. There has to be a prompt. So those things come together, behavior change can occur. When one of those three elements is lacking or missing, that's when the behavior does not change. So as we think about our potential audience, potential readers, potential viewers, whoever it may be out, we want to think about where is their motivation level, where is their ability level. Are we giving them enough chances to act? Are we giving them enough entry points, enough reminders, so that even if the motivation and ability is super, super high, if they're not reminded, if we don't give them the opportunity or the invitation to act, then we want to try and rectify that. This is somewhat helpful for me. It's less helpful for me than just kind of thinking about these three things happening. But as you can kind of says, if motivation is very high, then ability does not have to be very high. But of course, the harder something is to do, the ability one thinks they have, the higher motivation is sort of. So that's kind of how we think about how these three elements, motivation, ability, prompts, work together to make behavior change, which is what we want to do. So, how do we use this information? So, when you think about your marketing activities, whether posting something on social media, whether it's sending an email, whether it's a conversation you're having after a show one-on-one in person, whether it's talking to your family about the work that you're doing or whatever it may be, what is your objective for that, right? I think our marketing silos, sometimes it's very easy to feel like we're tons of stuff out there, tons of posts, tons of content, tons of language, and some feels like it does not reach anybody, that we're kind of shouting into the void. What's been helpful for me is if I think very specifically about what is my objective when I send out an email, what is my objective by posting that tweet or that picture or whatever it may be? Am I fulfilling one of these three things? Am I trying to increase somebody's motivation? Am I trying to communicate to somebody that they have an ability that maybe they did not previously think or recognize that they do to take action? Or am I sending out sort of a ping, a trigger, a reminder, a prompt that says, now is the time to act? This is also helpful if you're in the middle of your own campaign, if you're in the middle of a run of performances and things are not hitting as you want them to. If you think about these three things, motivation, ability, and prompt, what might be low at that particular moment in time for your campaign? If tickets are not moving and it may be price related, that's an opportunity to offer a discount, right? That increases someone's financial ability. If perhaps you haven't told the story behind your performance or whatever it may be enough, that may be something to kind of increase the level of motivation amongst your potential audience. And also, if you're about to embark on a campaign in your planning process, if you can say what factor is scarce at the time of sending out a product, how can you actively address the moment? One little takeaway that I sent to Solomon that I think you'll all receive as a follow-up is sort of a really basic communications calendar. I took what we're actively in the middle of, frankly, Hubbard Street Dance Chicago, our winter series. I took that, redacted some specifics. We'll get a sense of how we over here are balancing our email messaging, our social media messaging, and where in the course of our sales cycle we are choosing to really push something to increase motivation, where we're really pushing to increase ability, and where we're just kind of sending out reminders as a quick, short and sweet prompt for people to act if they've already had enough sort of heavy messaging regarding those first two, motivation and ability. All right, so taking the behavior model again. So we want to look at these three things. How are we increasing motivation? How do we communicate ability? And how do we effectively deploy these prompts, these triggers to get people to act the way we want them to? Okay, so let's talk about motivation first. Motivation circles around these intrinsic factors that are sort of universal to the human experience to increase motivation. It kind of goes off the premise that humans, as binary instinct, are motivated by a desire for comfort, a desire for community. We're highly motivated by versus pleasure. We want to feel comfortable. We don't like feeling dumb. We want to be part of something that we think will be a rewarding experience. That does not mean to say everything has to be fun and upbeat in that regard, but we want to make sure, or we want to at least feel like our time will be well spent doing something, spending our hard-earned money, spending our valuable time, whatever it may be, doing this thing. So there's a couple ways that we can kind of tap into these ideas to increase the potential motivation in our audience. A big one is community, right? If you have a particular performance or you're showing something in process or you're offering a peek behind the scenes, that is a really, really strong motivator for people to feel like they are part of something other than themselves, part of that community. There's also that FOMO factor, right? If you have that's got a very, very limited run, very, very limited inventory, limited capacity, then you can take advantage of that. You can capitalize on that and encourage people to be part of something that not everybody will get to be a part of, right? And that's another way that you can kind of take advantage of these innate things that are universal to many of us. An example of how we can use behind the scenes content, right? If it's accurate to your piece, if you say, hey, this is going to be entertaining, if it's going to be something that a fun experience, you also want to communicate that. If you're not literally sharing pieces of your or your dance piece, whatever it may be, you can that same kind of tone with the content that you're putting out there. Ability. So this is another important one. The goal targeting ability is make it easy for people, make it easy for the patron to take the desired action and to change their behavior by either making them acknowledge that they have this ability to do so or by increasing it. So here's an example that I kind of gave earlier, the idea of ticket price, right? If a ticket price is higher than is normal for a person, offering a discount not only makes them feel sort of special, unique, give them an opportunity to take advantage of something that's maybe only available for a limited time. It also just says, oh, look, that is now that falls within my perceived ability in terms of financial ability. Too many steps to do something, right? I think some in our desire to capture data about a potential patron, name, address, phone number, email, there's a lot of steps sometimes in the purchasing process. So what are you actually asking from patron? Do you really just need them to tell you that they are coming? Do you just need their email address so that you can send them important messaging? If you're able to distill what you actually need from a person, that increases their ability to do it. It takes less time out of their day to sign up for your performance or whatever it may be. So think about what you're asking the patron to do and consider if there is a simpler way to do that with fewer steps. And how much knowledge are you assuming the patron already has? Can you educate them to reduce the mental workload next time? It is asking a lot for people to do something that's maybe out of their typical comfort zone. So sometimes we might assume that everyone is used to attending a dance performance. Sometimes we assume people are used to attending a live performance, period. And it doesn't always help if we are not kind of giving as much information as possible. It may not be second nature for everyone to know that they should arrive 30 minutes curtain or something like that. The more information we can give people, we can make them feel smart or part of the experience and increase their perceived level of ability to engage with what you're doing if you give them the information. Again, all these things to you yourself, individual or as an organization, may not have the capacity to do all these things to all these various degrees, but they're simple sort of examples, and you can hopefully take what may work for you from some of these examples. Strategy 3, the idea of prompts. So if we have told the patron why they want to come, given them that motivation, if we've taken steps to prove to them that they have an ability to engage with us, that they have a good time, that they will, it will be worth we need to tell them to act, right? So if it's been a while since you've deployed a piece of marketing or a reminder, sometimes that's all someone needs is that spark. And if you are finding that the way that you talk about your work, the way you write about your work, perhaps gets very verbose, and you've been putting content out there that's a little heavier or more thorough, and consider varying up the content that you're putting out there. Consider something shorter, something straight to the point, one beautiful image, great dance shot for beauty's sake. There's nothing wrong with that. That sometimes is the reminder someone needs to go ahead and take action. Or, one trend that we've all noticing coming out of the pandemic or the height of the pandemic has been offices increasingly waiting last minute to take action. So that's why things like these prompts and these are important, because you never know how many people are just not acting because they're waiting until the last minute. So as you're approaching performance run or your exhibit or whatever it may be, don't be afraid to noise about it and send those reminders, even if you feel like you've been already sending out lots of reminders, because we'll need to get hit by a number of impressions, right? Or they can act before like they have to act because time is running out. That's kind of a very, very basic overview about the fog behavior. Here are two resources that I've been looking at a lot in terms of how the fog behavior model works, other examples of motivating factors, ways that you can increase ability, and types of prompts can also be found on these various websites. But if you Google it, I'm sure you'll find something as well. So how does this apply to us? How can we use it? Talked about some of these examples already, but how can small companies, independent artists use these strategies when you do have limited resources in terms of budget, time, whatever it may be? So in terms of motivation, something that we a lot about is what sets you and your work and your performance apart. The fact of the matter is that there's no one out there doing exactly what you're doing. So if you can tell your story authentically, honestly, that will just set you apart by the very nature that you are you. And use your assets to your advantage, right? This is a very specific example, but Hubbard Street Dance Chicago recently had this piece Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, Sweet Gwen Sweet, in our fall series at Steppenwolf. It's not every day that we get to announce a partnership with the Verdon Fosse legacy, and we get to promote that really unique piece. So, whereas in our typical marketing, we often don't call out one specific piece. We've been sort of marketing the program as a whole. We recognized kind of early in the planning process that this was a huge asset and this was an opportunity to really go all in on what we felt like was going to be a really strong selling point. And that really, delivered for us. That really, it really got people out and got them to act, got them to take action when we were pushing that specific unique element of fall series, for example. When it comes to ability, we are trying to reduce friction wherever possible. Again, this idea of making the action that you want the user to take as easy as possible for them. Can you drill it down the essentials? Think about what you actually need from the user. And then something that's been useful for me too, when I think about the way I consume media or the way I go to purchase tickets for something or go do free activity, whatever it may be, what stops me from acting, right? What stops me from going and booking a ticket for a performance next time? If it's free, it's not it's stopping me, right? Is it if it's close, it's not the distance or the commute, but what is stopping me from acting? And think about those things and try and address those factors with your audience because it is likely that your potential audience out there are people much like you, much like yourself. And yeah, simplify. We want to not make things hard for people is, I guess, the bottom line here. And then when it comes to these ideas of prompts, right? I discourage you from back. You know, this is a time when there's a lot of things competing for people's attention, whether there are live performance opportunities out there, whether it's streaming services or music or whatever it may be. You should assume that people are interested in what you do, especially if they already follow you, already in your network, and if they've seen you perform before. Sometimes all people need is that additional reminder and that additional. And so if you are looking at your own communications calendar, your own marketing plan, and are on the fence about, you know what, I just posted the day before, maybe it doesn't need another post, that's too much, just go for it and just change up the type of content that you're putting out there. And it won't make people think they're seeing the same thing over and over and over. I also have a note here, right? It doesn't mean that I'm telling you to create a new piece of content for every single day. That's not sustainable, especially for some of us with small teams, but it means maybe repackaging that thing, right? Can you talk about a different element of what your performance is or what you're marketing? And that may open up a door to a new type of patron out there who's seeing your content that you maybe had not reached before. And this is just the idea of staying top of mind. That's what these prompts are for. These reminders are for. And you know, we hear it all the time, even from us who have these regular messaging up there via email or social media. We say, you hear from someone said, "Oh, I didn't know about it. I didn't see that. I didn't hear that." The algorithms on things like social media are so hard to predict because they're always changing. Emails sometimes get lost, and a large segment of your audience may be more comfortable with one or the other. So don't be afraid to put the messaging out there. If it is, even if all you have for is putting out with a link, like it is that. So that was fast. I hope that is not too quick, but I do want to open up the floor for questions. I can Solomon, should I stop sharing my screen? I know I went pretty quick, but I can also go back to any slides that people want to delve deeper into.
Yeah, I would say you can go ahead and stop sharing.
Great.
And if anyone has any questions, we would love to read them, or I think with the time that we have now, we can even bring a couple folks up if they would like to hop on. If you could just indicate by using the hand raise reaction button. Um, I have a question to start.
Yeah.
So I've gotten from more than a handful of people, people being independent artists. Oh, maybe I should join you guys. How do I do this? Uh, how how much should independent artists, two questions. How much should independent artists prioritize PR efforts? And what is the best approach with a very minimal budget to build those relationships?
Great question. If I'm hearing you correctly, are we talking about kind of like the press pitching stories and that kind of thing? Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is a lot of PR firms and people who do this for their job, they have a people that they invite to everything, and they have a list of people who they pitch certain stories to. If you're an independent artist or younger in your career, you may not have that list, that literal list of people. What you do possibly have is access to someone's social media handle or something like that. I also know that for smaller companies and even independent artists, certain firms will do work not completely pro bono, a sliding scale, depending on the size of budget, if it may be. If it may exist rather. I'm on the board of this theater for young audiences called Filament Theatre, and we had a really great relationship. It was a limited time project, a company called the Silverman Group, year, and so what was in it for them by doing this work pro bono is able to sort of show us what they can do, right? But they also recognize that we were a company with frankly no budget for press and PR, and so that was an opportunity for us to say, is this something that we want to budget into future seasons? And it also just gave us a year of from them and working with them that we could also take some ideas and things from. Another example I'll give is like not as directly tied to press and PR. This musical that I've been producing, right? Time I've talked to somebody about it, whether it was a mentor, a theater producer I've met for, I've asked them if they've been comfortable with me kind of adding them to an email list, right? And this is a list just for my own personal email that maybe once a year, twice a year, I'll send an update email with what's been going on with the project. And so if you don't have a budget to buy something like MailChimp or a formal email platform like that, what you can do is kind of cultivate your own personal email list, and then people have given you permission to send them kind of updates on a semi-regular basis. Use that, and that can sort of be the start of your email list. And then if you are if you do have the opportunity to engage with someone from the press and PR world, you can add them to that. The other thing too, I think the hardest thing is getting someone to come see you. But
Yeah.
once someone does, you can have the opportunities there at that performance in terms of following up or whatever it may be to get people on your list, or to say, hey, if they're a press and PR person, if they're interested in you and your work, um, have a conversation with them, see what they're willing to do. But it's a great, and the bottom is if there's not budget for something, then it can't be something that you're pay for. But if you can just kind of cultivate those relationships in a more organic way, or frankly, if you're someone who's going out and applying to grants and things like that, if you're saying, hey, this is something that I have identified would really take me to the next level, perhaps you could get financial support that way. But I would start just by, there's a bunch of firms right here in Chicago of varying sizes, and it never hurts just to send an inquiry to whatever contact us email may be on a firm's website, or filling out a form, or sending a DM, because you never know where it might lead.
Yes. I'd like to just shout out Shout Media or Shout Relations. I'm sorry, James. James Giuliano is on the call, and Shout Marketing and Media Relations. There we are. And James has been a super valuable resource in our work over the past few years, even before I was here. So James is on the call, you guys. James, if you want to drop your contact in the chat, I'm sure we have some potential new business for you. All right, so I'm going to hop over to the chat. Joseph Pendelski from Joel Hall Dancers and Center asks, do you have thoughts about oversaturation when it comes to email, the noise making?
We can't control what everyone else is going to do, right? So potential patrons inbox is going to be full, but it's going to love Black Friday sales, Giving Tuesday thing, everything. And so I focus on your capacity you can do. And so I think there is such thing as too much and oversaturation, but I think it's only perceived as that when it's really the same messaging that's being hammered over and over. Yes, there's something to be said for brand consistency and sort of consistency of messaging, but something that we try and do too is like, okay, if we are sending our even our full email list an email once a week,
Mhm.
how are we going to make it different than the last time? Even if it's not a new piece of content, it is just a different format that is speaking or sharing something we haven't shared in a long time. As long as it feels like there's a little bit of new information and it's not, you know, that you're not making someone think they got the same twice because of technical error. Um, People need the reminders now. Uh, it's hard to keep pushing things out like that, but I wouldn't worry about your audience who've in theory opted in to receive messages from you either by following you on social or by signing up for your email list. The reminders they have by in they've told you that they're interested in what you're doing. They just may need that extra reminder.
Yeah, that's definitely been something I've myself wondered about. Like, am I over emailing? And can we all just say that Giving Tuesday was a little intense this year? All right, so here is Jalen Ellis from Red Clay Dance Company. He says, in terms of social media coverage, how important do you think it is to go deep on one platform versus covering all the majors such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, in terms of engaging your audience?
That's a great question. I think about social media is that it's primarily um, prompt category, right? If we're thinking behavior model in the three prompt, the motivation, ability, and prompt, many things will more than one thing. But, to me, really, I don't know. At least for me as a consumer, it's rare I'm seeing a post on social media and I'm going and clicking through the link and acting immediately. More often than not, it serves to support sort of a deeper, uh, to use your language, a deeper, more comprehensive piece of storytelling, perhaps email, perhaps in the press or whatever it may be. So because of that, I also would say look at your own capacity. I think in an ideal world, if everyone had a staff of 10 and had a social media person and doing all this and that, I think it would be um you're on all platforms thinking about that specific audience. But
Mhm.
men don't live in that world. I don't live in that world currently. So what we often do is that we have is that we if we know we have content, whether it's photos, blog, reviews, we say, okay, here's the content that we have. The work has been done in generating it.
Mhm.
What is feasible? What is reasonable to our team in terms of adapting it to different platforms? And how might it best perform for the LinkedIn audience? How might it best perform for the Instagram audience? I feel like I cheated and didn't totally answer your question, but that's where I went.
No, for sure. And you kind of like nudged at my follow-up question, which is in one of our previous conversations, Eric, you mentioned kind of building an identity per platform and prioritizing what sorts of content goes on each of those platforms. Do I do that religiously? No, but I try to remember that, like, okay, news articles, previews, and things of that nature That's definitely, we want to get that on LinkedIn and Facebook because that audience, they're used to clicking through and reading something right away. Versus our Instagram audience, they're there for a visual appetite, like they're trying to feed that aesthetic thing, you know. So I share that with the group because it was really helpful to me, and I'm still working on like embedding that into my practice.
Yeah,
Uh,
and and just to say that, I'm not the expectation is not that you have a whole content creation department. Sort of looking at what you do have and how can you repackage it for the different channels.
Absolutely. All right. So we have Wade Schaff here. Wade asks, also, I want to shout out the company, Chicago Repertory Ballet. Wade asks, what strategies have you found to be very effective with your audiences? The more I work on marketing, the more I realize that there are numerous strategies I could take to reach goals, increasing audiences, gaining more followers. And it's hard to know what is worth my time and effort. Hello. What seems to be effective in your experience, let's say where audience building is concerned?
Thanks, Wade. Yeah, I mean, besides this model, which I've chosen to sort of spotlight session, the idea of entrance has been top of mind for me as well. You can think about, so let's say you're to grow the audience, you want more people who've never been to Chicago Repertory Ballet before. I think you want to think about, well, where are they coming from, right? The people who are also Hubbard Street Dance Chicago, is the people who are also Harris patrons or Joffrey patrons or whatever it may be, and meet them where they're at. Or if it's and whether price point, we work with a wide range of price points. We have the cheapest ticket for the upcoming winter series is $20. The highest tier is $110, and those are based placement in the house and everything like that. But I'm trying to think about if I'm trying to get someone who's never come to Hubbard before, where can I remove obstacles and barriers to that? If I'm already asking someone to spend their time with us, if I'm already asking someone to potentially pay for a babysitter or whatever it may be, get on the train, sit on there for an hour, what do I have control over? What part of the experience do I have control over that I can adjust to meet them where they are? So even if they're a patron who could afford $100 ticket, maybe they're a first time patron and saying, you know what, I'm going to control what I can. I'm going to reduce the price, make a $20 ticket available, make a buy one, get one free offer available for a first time audience member, and say, I'm going to try and reduce the risk for you a little bit in terms of in an area that I can control. And so that entry points and sort of where are student groups getting their information, where are theater goers in Chicago getting their information and trying to get there, would be my suggestion to the audience and creating as many entries for as many types of audience members as possible.
Got it. Um, okay, I'm sorry. I'm going back up the chat to make sure I didn't miss anyone. We have an anecdote from Sean. Wade says, thank you. We have an anecdote from Sean that says, I was really compelled by Ailey saying that today's live stream of the celebration of life for Judith Jameson would not be available afterwards. But somehow I don't usually have that same thinking with one night only language for live performances. Yeah, I think, and Eric, I would love to know your insight here. I think it was a mixture of just so many things. Like we're talking about a behemoth of a legacy, right? And you don't want to miss the opportunity as a global community to engage in that celebration and honoring of a legacy. So I think there was a lot of energy behind getting there. I tuned in for as long as I could, and then I had to hop over here. Eric, do you have any thought there? Can we capture that same kind of magic in a bottle for a live performance?
That's a great point. Like coming from the world of theater where we have a play that's running for 6 weeks to 3 months, advantage there is that we have word of audience to build upon about that different performance. Coming over to Hubbard and getting the different timing cycle of the season for a dance where there's often fewer performances and you can't really rely on that word of mouth about that specific programs. Yeah, I think it is really smart to embrace the ephemeral nature of it and the very, very limited nature of it and really take advantage of that, especially as we're thinking of ways to make up for the fact that so many people are acting last minute. If you can capitalize on that fear of missing out, and or if there are any other advantages in terms of people buying earlier rather than later, push
Mhm.
those. A thing that's related to the five behavior model and getting people to the way you want is sort of trying to quote unquote train the audience to in the way you want, right? Something a trap that's really easy to do, that you keep your ticket prices high for as long as you can because you want to maximize revenue for as long as you can. Then if something is underperforming for a particular reason, you want to move closer to the show, and you
Mhm.
have to discount it at the last minute. So
Yeah.
then what essentially you're unfortunately having to do is you're rewarding the audience with a cheaper ticket for. So something that we implement sometimes at Hubbard, depending on the run, is saying, hey, if we are in a place where we think maybe discounting in the future for whatever reason it may be, what would happen if we move that discount earlier in the sales cycle? We're going to reward people for acting early
Here.
by offering a financial incentive, and then tell people that if waiting to buy last minute, there's going to be fewer good seats available and at the full price, whatever it may be. So yeah, bit of a tangent, but it's a really good observation.
Yeah, I wonder, is there value these days? And I've seen this with like larger, like Kendrick Lamar is going on tour next year and he has this pre-sale starting, right? Um, is that same practice useful in our very, is it useful in the local community here? Like, should the hot crowds or the CRBs play around with pre-sales for an exclusive group of people? Like maybe that's a fundraising approach, but like people want to be
Yeah,
part of the cool thing, you know?
totally. And I think it's about objective, right? Like, does that work for a particular organization or individual artist because they're using it as a fundraising element? And hey, if I want to get almost like a subscription model, right? If I
Yeah.
want to get more money in the bank up front, how can what leverage do I have to ask audiences to do that? I think it's, and I think it depends. I think it's like what quote unquote per benefits or access can you offer in exchange? What is the user getting out of it? Because like the answer that I'll put to you, Solomon, is like, are you enticed by that pre offer, right? What is in it for you in terms of, well, okay, you already know you have tickets. That's like one thing. Is it any cheaper? Do you have other things that you get access to by becoming that? There's those bragging rights that you got in earlier before anybody else. That's valuable too.
Yeah. Yeah. Just idea. Offer that to the group. All right, we have Jalen Ellis again from Red Clay. He says, "Thank you for answering my question. Just one more. Just one more. You can have multiple, Jalen. There's no limit. Are there any specific tools or technologies that your team has started using to be more productive or effective that could be helpful for small teams or solo artists?"
Another great question. At Hubbard, we have two people in the marketing department, myself and Megan Moran. And we also have a development and fundraising department, which is four. And so of us are sort of external affairs is how we refer to ourselves. So Megan and I, even just the two of us, we use a platform called Asana quite frequently, which is a task management software. They have a free tier, and it's also used as an individual as well in terms of the calendar building capabilities. You can put your communications calendar in there, and it can automatically send you reminders to do a task, to hit a certain milestone. So that would be one I would call out because it would have a free version, and it is then also possible to share with a larger team.
Mhm. Um, wait, I did it again. Sorry. Okay. Yes, I also want to call out Monday.com. I've personally, a marketing team of one, have started using it, but it's proven to be very helpful, at least in like the road mapping of a campaign. So I offer that to the group as well, and I'll add that to the chat. Um, let's see. So yes, yes. Sean Lent from Chicago Dance Makers Forum asks, are Hootsuite Sprout Social, etc., still a thing? Do people still use those? Are they out of fashion? I've wondered that myself, Sean. Erik,
Um,
have any insights?
I don't know 100%. I'll say when we did use Hootsuite at this point, when I was at Writers Theater between 2017 and 2021, the biggest function of that we used was to schedule posts in advance. Um,
Mm,
but it ended up being like we would spend just the same amount of time figuring out that platform and programming it to do what we wanted to do than we would do if we were scheduling the posts live, and
right.
particularly serve us very well. I think for the right person, it could unlock a lot. It wasn't something that we really used. No. And as far as right now, what it's like, I'm not sure. It's a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I can echo that. It in the time it took to set the thing up and develop the unique content, I could have just gone and posted it myself. And Meta has such a robust business suite where you can do two of the major platforms in one place that, has proven to be, there are some kinks, but, it's still a pretty useful platform. So excuse me, are all of the questions that we have in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions for Erik? Or, I mean, I can offer some of my insights also. Let's see. All right, we have Katie from Aerial Dance Chicago. Katie says or asks, thinking of what you said about approaching the same content from different angles and showing different aspects of an event, are there any mental processes or approaches or tools that you use to create this type of content?
Mental approaches, tools. I think audiences, in my experience, they want to know to expect. Even if, you could poke holes in that and say, well, if you're going to go see like a murder mystery play, you don't want to know what's going to happen. And that's true. But I think, going to the idea of motivation and one of these main motivator for people is you don't want to feel dumb. And so part of what I try and do is educate the audience a little bit. You're never going to completely hit the nail on the head in terms of what someone's bringing into performance experience. But if I can tell them what the piece is going to be like. That's not always easy with a world premiere. If I can't tell them what the piece is quote unquote about, there's a segment of people who don't want to spoon feed too much information to an audience. That's fine. There's still ways to talk about the experience of to an event and what it will feel like, what it could be like, who else might be there that you can promote. So I don't know. I'm not sure I'm totally answering the question. My goals are tell the audience a little bit about what expect, what they can anticipate, whether it's from a particular piece or the experience of event. And then when you're looking at a piece of content, once something has been created, maybe it's a narrative about a dance piece, maybe it's a photo album, and that's the content. When you are looking at it, looking at using it on different channels, then I think you want to think about the audience of that outlet. A LinkedIn might be more business, let's say, than someone who's on TikTok. That's a huge generalization. But I think my main sort of point is generate the content that you are able to and interested in putting out there, and then give yourself a little bit of time to think about how you're publishing across the various platforms.
Yes. I was just gathering a couple of resources that I know folks are using. Um, Katie, to answer the types of tools, I've used very religiously Adobe Express when resizing because Adobe will take the thing and make it a story, and then it'll make it a post, and then it'll make it a banner, So I've put that in the chat here for the group. Adobe Express, it does come with a bit of I don't know what the fee is, but I think they have nonprofit or contractor options, I would definitely check it out. I also offer to the group Canva. Canva has a free service that you can use. It's not with the free service, you can't duplicate and resize. You need a pro permission to do that, but you can take the workaround I've used is taking the file, starting a new file at the new size that I want, and then just expanding the content to that size. um, hey, you got to make it work. All right. Winifred from Winifred Haunted Dancers asks, what are your thoughts about paid ads on Meta?
Paid ads on Meta, I think, are very useful. To a, I think it's a great thing to experiment if you've never done it before. You have $50 to put into a week-long campaign or 2 weeks and see what it does for you. I think that's a very worthwhile experiment to do. Um, they have gotten less creepy, I'll say, over the past 10 years in terms of like the level of behavioral information that you can get about a user. Great for mankind and humankind, just harder for marketers, right? You can still target a segment of people based on their interests and things like that. A lot more granular, which was
Oh,
exciting and scary, and also, frankly, it took some more time. But you geo target and all kinds of stuff on Meta, and they make it relatively easy. The tough thing with that Meta too is they also always changing how their back of the platform works, so it can be a little bit of challenge. You don't have a ton of time to put a lot of time into creating a campaign. That's where boosted ads, to Sean's point, can also be helpful if you're going to post something anyway, and you can put some data behind it to have it run as a sponsored post. That's useful as well. So general thoughts are worth trying if you've never done it, and then seeing how it performs for you. And if you already have sort of a budget and a marketing plan, I think it is quite useful to have as part of your sort of.
yeah. Um, all right. So we've kind of touched on similar to the question above. This is Sean Lent. I have a question on where to use boosted ads and when to use lead ads. Well, yes. Do you have any insights there, Eric, around because I've also wondered like what needs to be boosted, right? And then in turn, if I'm understanding Sean's question right, like developing lead campaigns on social. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it has to do with what is your particular objective at that given time or for that given series of performances or whatever it may be. If your goal is to get as many people to your show, period, you're probably better off boosting an ad or generating an ad that's targeting people who already have your page and people like that, because that's going to be the quote unquote lowest hanging fruit for you if someone has already expressed interest in you and your work. If you have more time, it's just another thing that you'll hear people say a lot is that new audience member is also super expensive in terms of how much money you have to spend per person to find them. But if that's a goal of yours on a season-wide level, on a campaign-specific level, then you want to sort of increase your leads and have whatever platform it is just a little bit of a wider net, because never know who's out there. It's just more expensive to convert someone who's perhaps never you and never seen you before to a follower. It is to people who've already expressed interest in and serve them a reminder and make sure that their feed.
Heard. Okay, we're at 12:56. I'm glad that the presentation wrapped early because the questions are rolling now. Jalen asks, do you have any thoughts on SMS marketing, text messaging? You've touched on social and email. Do you see audiences moving to SMS marketing as an additional tool to get audiences to engage with your brand, as it usually has a higher open rate than email does?
I've had a tiny bit of experience with SMS marketing, and the test that we did was less about a sales pitch to someone, or we were using it as a communication tool. So theater, we it's a platform called, oh boy, I'm gonna forget it. It's not coming to me now. It was an SMS marketing platform. You could build it from your desktop. You could send out texts right on mass. This said, okay, if we're going to try this, not risk making someone mad by using it as like a sale. Let's first use it as like a performance reminder tool, and we were using that for performance reminders for people who already had tickets to certain performances. Many people found that helpful. I have not tried text messaging as a general marketing tool though. Um, and I frankly don't know a ton of arts organizations who are. Um, I don't get many of them from arts organizations. I get a ton of spam from a lot of other people, but not from like the people kind of in this room with us. So I think as a prompt idea, as an additional reminder, I think there's a lot of value in it, and there are more and more platforms that are worth trying in that regard. Um, I think if you're a company or an artist who has limited time and limited resources, I still think that the social, the slightly older kind of platforms and outlets are going to do more for you in terms of getting people to engage with the company than text. But if you are looking to try something new or engage with your audience or serve as a reminder a little bit differently, there's options out there that you can look into for sure.
Yeah. I've recently attended an executive roundtable where arts marketers from across the nation came together. And the common thread there is that they're all using, in the cases that they are using SMS, it's only for like day of event reminders, like, hey, your tickets are at will call. There's been a change in programming, things of that nature. All right, so guys, I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We are at 12:15.